Alright, so today's project, we're going to build a WatchKit app. We're going to use Watch Connectivity, and we're going to have our data from our iPhone visible and on the watch itself. So you're going to see that here we're running two simulators. We're running the iPhone 7 and we're running a simple Apple Watch Series 2. You'll notice that the watch is actually dependent on the phones. They're tethered together, but as of Series 3, they've broken away from the phone. But for now, we're just going to focus on a Series 2 app because that's probably the most common applications we're going to see, where between an Apple Watch and an Apple phone, you have your data transferred to and from using Watch Connectivity. Now, we will build a small little app here. It'll have a few buttons. We're really just going to focus on the first button, so program. You have your little program here, and just it's like a little conference app. It has like Jim Kirk, Mr. Spock, Mr. Scott. They're all, and Uhura are all attending, speaking at a conference here. And we're going to see that if I go to my schedule here. Now, it doesn't always work, connectivity that is. We have to play around with it, really massage it a little bit, and maybe try viewing it again. So there we go. We're going to see all of our conference information here. So the focus here is going to be on connectivity, which leads to a larger project that we're going to play with. So now what we're going to do is, I'm going to stop this, and we're going to launch a new project. So File, New, and then Project. And this time it will be a watchOS application. It'll be an iOS app with a WatchKit app. So it'll pre-build the entire project for us. And we'll hit Next. And I'm going to call this Watch Conference Connect app. And we'll give it a identifier. And the language will be Swift. And we will hit Next and give it a home. And all right, you'll notice that we have here our typical iPhone code. So we have an app delegate, we have viewcontroller.swift, we have a main storyboard, and we have a launch screen. But you'll notice that there are a couple of extra folders here. And so we're going to ignore the extension folder. We're going to focus on the WatchKit app folder that's just above it. And it has interface.storyboard and and also have the extension stuff. So we have a few extra folders to worry about here. And so now we have interface controller, we have extension delegate. We're going to talk about all of these as we navigate through. But basically from this folder down, we're going to be this will be all of our watch related code and UI stuff. So that's all watch stuff. Above this folder, up here, this is all iPhone stuff. So now you actually have two realms to worry about at the same time, the watch and the phone. We're going to start off in the phone, and we're going to start with our UI. So because there's so many folders here, I'm going to actually organize my stuff into separate groups. So I'm going to create a new group for my storyboards, and a new group for my view controllers, and a new group for my special classes. Just going to move all my stuff over so I can read it quicker. And I do the same thing for my watch stuff. So the WatchKit app itself, I'm going to leave it alone. It seems like there's only two files there to worry about. The extension, I'm going to create special classes and interface controllers. Now, you're probably wondering, what is an interface controller? Well, an interface controller is just it's like a view controller, but just for the watch itself. So that's the way to interpret it. So we'll start with special classes and interface controllers. All right, let's move my interface controller over. Put my extension delegate. Now you're probably wondering, extension delegate? Well, that is essentially an app delegate for the watch. Right? I also have a notification controller. I'll put that under special classes as well. We won't be dealing with notification controllers in this application at all, but that'll be the next project that we worry about. So now all of my stuff is organized, so it's easier for me to access. So I'm going to start off in my UI in the phone. So main storyboard. Actually, we'll start off with launch screen. And let's see here. Start with a simple little loading logo or loading label. All right. So I'm still going to approach the development of this like a typical iPhone app. Of course, without graphics, so bland and boring. So loading. And then jumping over to main storyboard, we'll have our home page there. All right, and the title for this will be Conference Planner. And we'll add 3 buttons here. Now, only one button will be functional for this application, for this video. And of course, the reason I put the other buttons is to give you ideas to how you can expand this app. So we'll start with program. The conference program or schedule or whatever you want to call it. Then we have, see if I can just copy and paste. Go. Next one will be speakers. So as practice for you to take further, you can see, so my schedule. Maybe, have your own custom schedule. All right. So we'll just have like 3 buttons there. All right, and that'll be our home page. Now, what we'll do is we'll add another view controller here, just for the program page. Right? And so now, what we'll do is we'll put like a little nav bar at the top. And we'll call it program, a little bar button item. Put the word back. We won't implement the back button. There's so many other things to focus on, but from my past videos, you know that you can create an unwind segue and put that method in the view controller object and link it up to the exit icon, and voila, you have a back button working. And we're going to put a table view here. All right, so there's table view. Now I'm going to break away from tradition where I've forced my students to always type out the table view cell. And instead, we're going to drag a table view cell. And once you see how to do this, you're going to think, oh my god, it's so easy. Why did he force us to do it the hard way? All right, so we're going to do our table cells in Interface Builder this time. And I'm not going to provide all the information for the cell, but I'm going to design one anyway. So I'm going to start with a image view, small little one. It's always tricky to get it in there because it's so large. There. And we'll put a few labels. One label there. And the text for that will be title. Put speaker. And we need a couple more labels below, kind of hitting the edge there. We'll say from. And finally, one more label, it's like right here. We'll say to. Maybe put a little dash. And, just for completeness, let's put a button. Tiny little button in the corner to say save. But we won't implement that. We're really going to focus on title, speaker, from, and to. But just for a future expansion, if you felt bold and wanted to grow this, you can. All right. So at this point, we have our UI for the iPhone in place. Now, what we want to do is we want to create some objects here to link up with this view controller. So the first thing we'll do is under view controllers, we're going to add a new file. iOS CocoaTouch class. And I'm going to call this program view controller. Language Swift, no XIP file, give it a home. And I'm going to add one more under special class. In fact, I'll add two more. So we're going to add new file, iOS CocoaTouch class. And this will be a UI table view cell. And we'll call it program table view cell. Language Swift, give it a home. Finally, one more object. We'll talk about this in a moment. iOS CocoaTouch class. And it will be an NS object. I'm just going to call it program object. Swift language. Give it a home. All right. So we have here program view controller. We're going to use that to be our view controller for that new page. Program table view cell is going to be our table cell object for that particular table cell. And then we got program object. We're going to use this as a custom object to transfer data. So we're going to serially send our program info one session at a time to our watch, and we're going to do it through the program object. So looking at main storyboard, let's cast our objects. So starting with view controller, highlighting the yellow circle, going to our identity inspector class, we're going to choose program view controller. All right, that's the first step. Now for the table cell, and to do that I'm going to rely on my document view, table view cell, and I'm going to subclass this as program table view cell. So that saves a lot of headache right there. But furthermore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this identifier, or this cell an identifier. So switching over to my attributes inspector, I have an identifier. I'm going to call this program cell. There. So I have program cell. So now we can focus on writing some code for now, and then we can return back to all the other stuff later. All right, so now the next step is we're going to move over to our program table view cell.swift, and we're going to code up the table cells. So we're going to start with defining our IB outlets. So we're going to say IB outlet, and we'll say var title extends UI label, exclamation mark, var, we'll call this speaker, and then we have the outlet var img speaker. We're not going to deal with images, but just for completeness, UI image view, sometimes autocomplete is not your friend. Var from UI label, and finally, it's got that symbol, var to UI label. Now, maybe in case you're wondering, well, what about that save button? We'll create an IB action just for the sake we're creating an IB action. Won't fill it up with anything, but at IB action, func, and we'll call it save unsave selection. Sender would be UI button, but the method will be empty. And that's all we're going to do for our table cell. So we're just going to do that. That's it. Now, the next step is to connect everything up. We're not going to code anything up in here. So Command S to save. Moving over to our main storyboard. Let's go to our connections inspector, and we see all of our stuff here. So from IMG speaker, speaker title 2. We have save unsave, becomes a touch up inside. And so that's it. We have all of our connections connected up for the cell. Now our next step is to go over to our program object. So this, again, like I said before, this is our object that will handle connectivity, transferring data to and from the watch. So we're going to use this as our object to send between. Now, first thing we're going to do is define the items we want to transfer to and from the watch. So var title will be a string. Var speaker will be a string. Var from will be a string as well. I'm not going to bother with date and time formatting for this exercise, but you can always expand that to use date and time. Then we'll say var to will be a string, and var details will be a string. And we're not putting details on the UI, but for future expansion, you can click on a table cell, and maybe it'll give you a popover or something to indicate the details of the particular session. That's the first thing. Now, what we're going to do is create a constructor to save this data. So we're going to create a func init with data, passing in title, which is a string. I need separate lines for readability. Speaker, string, and we'll use from string to string and details string. And we're just going to save all this stuff. So we'll say self.title equals title, self.speaker equals speaker, self.from equals from, self.to equals to, self.details equals details. And as you can see, I am a Objective-C programmer as well, so I switch between the languages all the time. So you see me using semicolons and some Objective-C syntax by accident, and I correct myself right away. Anyway, going back to our constructor. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a second constructor. And this constructor will be used for serializing and deserializing our object here. So to do that, I'm going to bring in an interface. So I'm going to say NSKeyedCoding. NSKeyedCoding has the requirements for serializing and deserializing our objects. So it's complaining, but it's not letting me autocomplete, so I can't really take advantage of any autocompletion from Xcode, so I'm going to have to type out what I need next. So I need another constructor. We're going to say required convenience init with a question mark, passing in coder, decoder, and NSKeyedCoder. All right, just going to move that up a bit. And we're going to create one more method. So we're going to say func encode with coder, NSKeyedCoder. All right. And so we'll start off with encode. So the encode's job is to just take our object, encode it, and that way we can take this object and send it off to the watch for the watch to deserialize it. So we're going to say coder.encode. We'll say self.title for key, call it title. Then we'll say coder.encode, and we'll say self.speaker for key speaker. So coder.encode. Now, as you get the idea, we're going to do our from for key. I'll just say from. We'll do the next for to. And finally for details as well. All right, so that's our encode function. And that will be used for allowing us to serialize and send off our data. Now, this one is used for deserializing the data. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to take this program object, we're going to share it between the watch and between the phone. So when we're encoding and sending off data from the phone, we're going to use the encode function, and when we're receiving data on the watch side, we're going to use this init for decoding and saving it. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is say guard let title equal decoder dot decode object. All right, within decode object, we'll say for key title. We'll say as string. We'll do a comma, and we'll say let speaker equal decoder dot decode object for key, and we'll say speaker as string as well, with a comma at the end. We'll say let from equal decoder dot decode object for key. We'll say from as string let to equal decoder dot decode object for key 2 as string. And finally, let details equal decoder dot decode object for key details as string. Else return nil. All right, and so that'll be our serialization of this, or deserialization of this object here. Now we're not done yet because we create all these variables and we're not using them. That's what the warnings are for. And the error is because we're not returning self, which we will in a moment. So first thing we're going to do is say self.init. All right, there the error should go away, and it does. And then we're going to do a self init with data, passing in title, speaker, from, to, details. All right, I think we're good. So now this object is complete. So now we're calling init with data. We called a super constructor. And now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the next object to code up. So we have this object. Now we're actually going to use it. We're going to use it inside the view controller. So now the next step, moving over to program view controller.swift, is to start coding up the view controller. What we're going to do is we're going to start off with just creating a method called init with fake details. So init fake details is give me the name. Of course, we have to put the word func. And no arguments passed in. All right, and so we're just going to populate some data here. So we're going to say let prog obj equal program object and we'll say prog obj init with data. And we're just going to hard code some fake information. So I'm going to say like far and away. Speaker will be Jim Kirk. From Friday, October 21st, comma 3:15 to, we'll just say 4 details. Jim will say something cool. Then the next thing, we're going to do a let prog obj2 equal program object prog obj2 dot init with data. It's going to say the next speaker will be speaking on being slow and steady. Speaker will be Mr. Spock. From Friday, October 21st at 4:15 to, we'll say 5. Details, and we'll say Mr. Spock is going to talk about being slow and steady. We'll say let prog obj3 equal program object probably 3.init with data. And so next speaker will be old and boring. Speaker is Mr. Scott. From Friday, October 21st at 5:15 to 6. Details, we'll say Mr. Spock and Mr. Scott have spoken about cool things. And finally, let prog bj4 equal program object. Say prog obj4.init with data. And we'll say why me. Speaker Uhura from Friday, October 21st at 6:15 to 7. And we'll say Uhura will talk about some crazy things in Klingon. So we have 4 objects here that we will create, that we've created. Now we need to save them in an array because that's what tables are for. So we're going to create a little array above, say var programs extends program object, make equal to an empty array. And now, back in init fake details, we will add them. So we'll say programs.insert and we'll say prog obj at 0. In fact, I'll just copy and paste those lines, that line. So we have prog obj 1, 2, 3 at, or sorry, 2, 3, and 4. At 1, 2, 3. And then we should call init fake details in view.did_load. All right. So now that we have this stuff, our next step is to get the table completed. So starting off at UI view controller, we're going to define our UI table view data source and UI table view delegate. And then that forces us to define our table methods, which I'll do down here at the bottom. So we're going to say number of rows in sections. So basically how many cells I'm going to have in my table. So I'm going to return programs.count. We're going to skip over height float index path because that's taken care of inside the storyboard. We're going to jump straight to cell for row at. And now we're going to define our table cell and what each table cell looks like. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try and retrieve a table cell. We're going to assume the scenario of where a table is leaving the screen and we need to repopulate with new information. So we're going to say let table cell, which extends program table view cell, equal table view dot dequeue reusable cell with identifier. We'll call it program cell as we did in our storyboard a little while ago. We'll say as program table view cell. Now what happens is if this is the other scenario where the table cell has is brand new, the table cells are brand new, there's not enough cells to put on the screen yet, we need to instantiate some cells. We're going to do a double question mark and say, you know, if that's nil, because it'll return nil, then we're going to instantiate one. So we're going to say program table view cell Style will be UI table view cell style dot default. Reuse identifier will be program cell. All right, so there. Either way, we have a cell to work with. And now that we have a cell to work with, we're going to go ahead and retrieve our item from the array. So we'll say var row equal index path dot row. And we'll say var row obj equals programs of row. And now we can populate the cell. So we'll say table cell dot title dot text is equal to row obj dot title as string. Table cell dot speaker dot text equals row obj dot speaker as string. Table cell dot from dot text equals row obj dot from as string. Table cell dot to dot text equals row obj dot to as string. And finally, return table cell. All right. Now you could go to the final step of adding an event handler to each cell. I'll put in an empty one just for the heck of it, just so that you can see it. So we'll say did select row at. I'll leave it empty. That's for you to maybe add an alert box or add something that will maybe indicate the details for what we're dealing with. All right. So we have enough here to just test out and verify that our table is working. So I'm going to switch over to the storyboard, main.storyboard, and connect up my table cell. Connections inspector, highlight my table view, data source, and delegate. And let's run this thing. Now to run this thing, well, we really just need an iPhone 7 right now, so we can leave this alone. We don't need to launch the simulator, so let's just launch into it. You may have heard a ding there. Ooh, it's saying it's full. But our interest right now is on the home page. And of course, we forgot to connect up one thing. So we didn't connect our program button to the program page. So I'm just going to do that right now. Set modally, try again. Program, and there we go. So we have our table up and running. No images, save button doesn't do anything, but just to verify we have our table up and running.